Good afternoon, students of Chinese YMCA Secondary School. We are now going to play you the news clip from yesterday.
The court case on whether lawmaker Cheng Chung-tai desecrated the national and Hong Kong flags in the Legislative Council chamber last year is entering its final stages. Winner Wong has the latest.
Cheng Chung-tai arrived at the Eastern Magistracy this morning. Pro-establishment lawmakers Lau Kwok-fan and Anne Chang were also called to the witness stand today. Lau testified that on October 19, 2016, he handed out 12 sets of national and Hong Kong flags to his pro-establishment colleagues inside the LegCo chamber to put on their desks while a meeting was taking place. He said it was to show Hong Kong is an inseparable part of China and to show respect for the country. While being challenged by Cheng's lawyer, Lau admitted he never confirmed whether the flags met official specifications and therefore called them replicas. But he argued they carried enough of a symbolic significance for them to be considered flags. But Cheng's lawyer said even Lau himself did not believe they were the real thing, and that's why he called them replicas. Next, it was Anne Chang's turn to take the witness stand. She said she was very angry with Cheng's behavior that day. She felt he had disrespected the national flag and went up to confront Cheng. She described his manner during that exchange as indifferent. During the Legislative Council meeting, a number of pro-establishment lawmakers had put Hong Kong and national flags on their desks in response to some lawmakers who called for Hong Kong independence during their oath-taking ceremony. But during a recess, Chang went up to their desks and turned the flags upside down. He has pleaded not guilty to 1 count of desecration of the national flag and 1 count of desecration of the regional flag. Magistrate Cheng Lim-chi today found that there is a prima facie case against Cheng, and both the prosecution and the defense will make their closing arguments next Friday. Cheng has decided to remain silent and will not call any witnesses. Winner Wong, TVB News.
A group of people showed up at the Chinese University of Hong Kong today to protest against posters and banners advocating the city's independence. The props have been cropping up around campus over the past few days. The protesters clash with students. University authorities have asked the student union to take the banners and posters down, but the students have refused, saying that would be political censorship. CUHK Vice-Chancellor Joseph Sung wrote on his blog, and he called for peaceful and rational discussion. He added that the idea of Hong Kong independence is a breach of the Basic Law. Turning overseas now, China says it agrees the United Nations Security Council should take further actions against North Korea in the wake of its latest nuclear test. But Beijing also wants dialogue to resolve the crisis. This comes as the US military deployed 4 additional missile interceptor launches to South Korea, a move which triggered protests around the country. Anger is brewing in South Korea over the deployment of the US Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Missile System in the country. Protesters scuffled with police before dawn this morning over the deployment of more launches of the THAAD system to counter any potential North Korean missile attack. Later, when military vehicles carrying the defense system drove by, protesters threw projectiles and tried to push through police lines. More than 30 people were injured when around 8,000 officers broke up the blockade of about 300 villagers and activists. South Koreans aren't the only ones unhappy about THAAD. Today, China lodged a complaint with South Korea for installing the 4 remaining launches of the US system. The clashes come as South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe met at a forum in Vladivostok. They repeated their calls for stronger punishment of Pyongyang following its test of a hydrogen bomb last Sunday, including the denial of oil supplies. Calls for sanctions were also backed by Australia's Defence Minister in Seoul today.
We are strongly encouraging our counterparts internationally and, of course, regionally to take up the regime of sanctions that the UN Security Council has resolved upon. These are very important tools for delivering key messages to the regime in North Korea, that their actions are provocative, are destabilising, are illegal, and are not contributing in any way, shape or form to international security or stability.
But Russian President Vladimir Putin maintains that sanctions are not a solution. China says it will support more UN sanctions against North Korea, but also stress that punitive measures alone won't work and that dialogue must be used to ease tensions. US President Donald Trump said he spoke with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping on the North Korean problem.
We had a very good phone call. It lasted for a long time. President Xi would like to do something. We'll see whether or not he can do it. But we will not be putting up with what's happening in North Korea.
As to whether America would use force,
We're going to see what happens. We'll see what happens. Certainly that's not our first choice, but we will see what happens.
Hurricane Irma has killed at least 8 people and left many more injured in the Caribbean island territories. The Prime Minister of the tiny island of Barbuda calls the scene total carnage. As the Category 5 storm roars towards Florida, experts say Irma could easily be the most costly storm in US history. James Aitken reports.
It's been called a potentially catastrophic storm, but Irma has already brought catastrophe to parts of the Caribbean. Among Irma's first victims, Barbuda, part of a tiny 2-island nation that took a direct hit.
What I saw was heart-wrenching. I mean, absolutely devastating. In fact, I believe that on a per capita basis, the extent of the destruction in Barbuda is unprecedented.
About half of Barbuda's population of about 1,800 is now homeless. Authorities are rushing to get relief supplies to the area, but they say it could take months or years to restore some level of normalcy to the island. Officials say that Saint Martin, the French part of the territory shared with the Dutch, is 95% destroyed. As rescue teams fan out, officials expect casualty figures to rise. French President Emmanuel Macron is expected to travel to the region as soon as weather conditions permit. Irma is now tracking towards the Dominican Republic and Haiti. It swept past the Virgin Islands and blacked out more than half of the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, where at least a dozen hospitals are now on emergency power. At the White House, the president has approved an emergency declaration for the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
There's a new and seems to be record-breaking hurricane heading right toward Florida and Puerto Rico and other places. We'll see what happens. We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
In Miami, tourists and locals are crowding into the airport, hoping to get out of town.
I bought the ticket, but I can go home. So yeah, I think I'm gonna wait here for the hurricane.
I have afraid because it's a large hurricane.
Irma is expected to make landfall in Florida over the weekend, but shifting forecasts have prompted emergency declarations in the Carolinas and coastal Georgia. Meanwhile, forecasters are watching 2 other storms as they intensify in the same region. James Aitken, TVB News.
US President Donald Trump has cut a surprise deal with Democrats to keep the government operating for the next 3 months and raise America's debt ceiling, overruling some congressional Republicans. In a highly charged bipartisan meeting in the Oval Office, Trump agreed with Democrats on the 3-month debt limit extension. Republicans, including House Speaker Paul Ryan, pushed for a longer extension to avoid another vote on the politically toxic issue before 2018 congressional elections. Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer said that given the need for disaster aid in the wake of Hurricane Harvey and an expected hit by Hurricane Irma, it was crucial to avoid a government debt default.